Hello, welcome to another Wine with Tweedy video. It has been a whole 24 hours since I was last sitting at the base of a tree drinking Burgundy, so naturally that was an itch I felt it needed scratching again, some such. Vosne Romanée today. This is a producer called Rion et Heath. I think I've had this exact bottle before, well not this specific, that's a philosophical question. A bottle of the same wine, the same vintage, the same producer, was obviously a physically distinct entity. You know what I mean? I've had this wine before, but I don't think I took any notes of how it was, so now and again, I don't know, I have friends around or something, I end up just opening a couple of different bottles and not really pausing to reflect on what they're individually like. So I'm keen to revisit this and see how I think of it, what I think about it. Struggling to form basic sentences there. Very autumnal on the Heath today. I feel like I'm overusing that word in recent videos, but it is very striking at the moment, the colours, possibly even exacerbated, if that's the right word, or highlighted by the fact the weather has been pretty gloomy. So, you know, an autumnal day when the sky is blue and the sun is shining feels quite different from this kind of very grey, very gloomy, very subdued sort of weather. Anyway, none of that's relevant to the wine. Well, maybe it is relevant to the wine, because the official tasting notes said with age this would develop sous-bois, the sort of aroma of the forest floor, and there's certainly plenty of that in the background. Mushroominess, which is also, I suppose, an autumnal smell, and it even goes as far as to say autumn leaves. So, I don't know if I'm going to get that, but this is a sort of somewhat autumnal wine. Well, as almost always when tasting Burgundy, cherry on the nose. There must be a sort of broader spectrum of cherry I can go into. Sometimes it ends up more kind of fresh and light, sometimes it's more Kirschy or Morello cherry-ish, that sort of liqueur type cherry. Sometimes it's black cherry, hard to pin down. There's a little floral waft that comes on the back of that, and again the official tasting notes talk of rose, which is one of the two floral expressions you typically get in Burgundy, in red Burgundy. It's either rose or it's violet. Yeah, I would say cherries and roses there. Cherries, how can I try and pin down the specific nuance of this type of cherry? Almost slightly cherry jam. I don't mean to say this wine is jammy, which is generally an insult to a winemaker to call their wine jammy, but something sort of a bit more condensed, a bit more preserved. Quite surprising acidity actually on the palate. A little bit more than I was expecting, which is, you know, not a bad thing, but given that aroma, I'd expected something a little bit softer. There's quite a zing to that. Usually wines that display acidity means that they're better suited to aging, because that's one of the things that gradually reduces over time. So a wine that is starting out with very little acidity is going to end up just plain flabby after a few years. So this is a 2017. I almost wonder if this might have been better off with a little bit more aging, given that very surprising acidity. But it does also give it a freshness. Tannins are very soft. Overall, that's pretty nice. I'm not yet getting the mushroomy sous-bois, forest floor, autumn leaves thing, but sometimes those tertiary aromas come out a little later after a bit more swilling. I gave it a minute or two, and now I'm getting the mushrooms. I'd say it's quite a nice, clean sort of mushroomy smell. Not so much rotting leaves, forest floor sort of smell, but like to say plain white mushrooms makes it sound boring, but that's sort of, you know, the sort of mushrooms that people who aren't massive fans of mushrooms wouldn't be too offended or weirded out by. It's nice. It's a nice bit of background character actually there. I've featured wines from Vosne Romanée a few times on the channel, and I think that's probably the single most expensive village in Burgundy, which is already probably the most expensive wine producing region in the world, and that's because of this one crazy stratospherically priced producer called Domaine Romanée-Conti, who these are the people who sell individual bottles starting at £3,000 or 2,800 something. So, you know, absolutely insane prices, and that seems to have this knock-on effect of the other producers who have small patches of land in Vosne Romanée, including people like Daniel Rion. Comparatively speaking, when you think that this is a village from which individual bottles can go for £3,000, this, I think, was a comparative bargain. It was from Bon Coeur, currently on special offer as well. This is £45 for a bottle. I always feel I have to prefix this with, yes, that is not, in the grand scheme of things, a cheap bottle of wine, but it is a very cheap bottle of Vosne Romanée. Even for the producers other than Romanée-Conti, it seems to have the highest sort of typical price. So for a very ordinary bottle of Vosne Romanée, I would normally expect to pay £70 plus. And it's quite a hard thing to find in traditional wine shops as well. It's something quite specialist that you usually have to go online to find. So, you know, if you were ever curious, getting a glimpse of what this crazily expensive £3,000 a bottle Domaine Romanée-Conti might be like, then this is probably the cheapest way to find out, to at least have something, at least have grapes grown in that same village from sites that, I don't know the precise location of the vineyards with relation to Domaine Romanée-Conti's vineyards, but they're in the same village, so they can't be that far away. And obviously a lot about the style of the final wine is down to the producer rather than necessarily, I'm slightly skeptical about the over-importance put on terroir. I mean, it certainly is a contributing factor, but I think usually the best wines come from the best producers, and I think an excellent winemaker can probably make something really quite special out of even mediocre terroir, you know, grapes from a not particularly exciting vineyard. So I personally think it has a little bit more to do with the winemaker. That I'm not saying that, you know, the provenance of the grapes is completely unimportant, but I think often the person or the people who are in charge of making it may be more of a deciding factor in something being an outstanding wine rather than an average wine. But all of that said, if you're ever curious about Vosne Romanée, if you as a village, you know, as I say, possibly the single most expensive village in Burgundy, you can get hold of bottles for a price that is, as I say, not in general terms something that would be considered cheap as wine goes, but certainly in Burgundy terms, and particularly in Vosne Romanée terms, I think £45 is a bargain. And it's 2017, the age is good, it's definitely drinkable now. It may well improve in a year or two from now. It's got that sort of bold acidity currently, but it's in really good shape, and I think it kind of tells you something about a village that certainly I would otherwise find. There's no way I'm spending £3,000 on a single bottle of wine. I think not really relevant to the wine, but I wish I could somehow better convey to you this wonderful sense of tranquility of tasting wine in a natural environment like this, listening to the wind rustling through the leaves and all those other cliches. So much nicer than being in a poncy wine bar or in a restaurant or some other setting of somebody else's choosing, of somebody else's design like that. Enough babbling. Cheers.